Hello, kindred spirits, and welcome back to Echoes of the Past. Tonight, we journey to a time of harsh winters and even harsher judgments, to a place where the wind whispers forgotten sorrows. Settle in, let us know where you're tuning in from in the comments below, and prepare for a tale of resilience, unlikely sanctuary, and a love that bloomed in the most desolate of landscapes. If you believe in the strength of the human heart, press that like button. And if you're new here, consider subscribing so you don't miss a single story that reminds us of who we were, and who we can become. Tonight, we ask, can a frozen heart ever truly thaw? This is the story of Ilara and Silas. The wind, a razor honed on glacial peaks, screamed across the barren platform of Redemption Creek Station, a place whose name offered a promise the landscape rarely kept. Snow, driven hard and fine, was a living shroud, erasing the world, reducing it to a maelstrom of white and a bone-deep, hollow cold. It was here, huddled on a solitary bench, little more than a drift of snow herself, that Ilara Reed waited. Or perhaps, she had ceased waiting and had simply begun to freeze, the line between the two states blurred by the encroaching numbness. Her valise, thin and worn, lay at her feet, a forgotten anchor. Her bonnet, askew, offered scant protection against the icy assault, and the shawl wrapped tight around her shoulders felt as substantial as mist. Dust from a long journey, now caked with ice, clung to her threadbare coat. She had been told someone would meet her, a representative from the school committee in the burgeoning settlement of Promise Valley. But the train, hours late, had chugged away into the blizzard hours ago, leaving only the echoing silence and the wind's mournful cry. Promise Valley. The name, like Redemption Creek, felt like a cruel jest now, a fading ember of hope in the face of winter's unyielding dominion. Her fingers, tucked beneath her arms, were stone, and her breath plumed, then vanished, stolen by the gale. Each shiver was a convulsion now, her body's desperate, failing protest. The tremors were less frequent, a terrifying calm beginning to settle in her limbs. The town, if it could be called that, was a distant smudge of flickering, indifferent lights through the swirling snow, too far to reach, too far to even contemplate. She was an outcast, cast out from one life, and it seemed, about to be claimed by the frozen indifference of this new, unforgiving land. A tear might have traced a path down her cheek, but it would have frozen instantly, a tiny, crystalline testament to her despair. Her past, a tapestry of whispered accusations and shadowed doorways, had chased her here, to this desolate terminus. She closed her eyes, the biting wind on her eyelids a final, cruel caress. The camera would linger on her chapped, blue-tinged lips, the delicate flutter of frozen eyelashes. Silas Blackwood, a man carved from the very granite of the surrounding mountains, urged his sturdy mare, Bess, through the deepening drifts towards the station. He wasn't a man for towns, less so for train stations, but the monthly supply run was a necessity, a ritual tethering his solitary ranch to the wider world. His wide-brimmed hat was pulled low, shoulders hunched against the blizzard he'd hoped to beat. He was a quiet protector of his land, his animals, his solitude. Years had passed since laughter echoed in his sturdy, isolated cabin. Grief had been a quiet, constant companion, shaping him into a man of few words and profound, unspoken sorrows. He expected the station to be deserted, save perhaps for old Jed, the station master, who'd be huddled by his stove. What he did not expect was the small, dark shape on the bench, almost entirely swallowed by the snow. His eyes, accustomed to peering through storms and discerning the subtle shifts of the wilderness, narrowed. He drew closer, a frown etching deeper lines into his weathered face. Dismounting, the crunch of his boots on the snow was the only sound besides the wind. He saw her then, not just a shape, but a woman, still, terrifyingly still. Her face, pale as alabaster, was tilted slightly, as if listening to a song only she could hear. For a moment, his heart, a slow, steady drum in his chest, seemed to falter. He'd seen death in the wilderness before, the swift, brutal work of nature. But this quiet surrender to the cold in a place meant for arrivals and departures, felt like a profound violation. He reached out a gloved hand, hesitating before gently touching her shoulder. His voice was rough, unused, like stones shifting. No response. Panic, an unfamiliar and unwelcome sensation, flickered within him. He knelt, brushing snow from her face with a surprising tenderness. Her skin was like ice. But beneath the layers of cold, he thought he detected the faintest, shallowest breath, a mere whisper of life. His mind, always decisive in action, raced. The town was too far, his ranch closer, and more importantly, his. He could offer sanctuary, warmth. Without the prying eyes and wagging tongues, a small town would inevitably turn on a stranger, especially one found in such dire straits. Without a word, he gathered her into his arms. She was lighter than he expected, a fragile burden. He wrapped his own thick, sheepskin-lined coat more securely around her slight form before lifting her onto Bess, settling her in front of him, cradling her against his own body's warmth. The mare, sensing the urgency, moved with a steady gait back into the teeth of the storm, away from the mocking promise of Redemption Creek, towards the isolated haven of Silas's quiet existence. He was unaware, as the wind howled its mournful song around them, that he was not merely rescuing a stranger from a blizzard, but carrying his own future, a future he had long since believed buried, towards the flickering light of his hearth. The camera would pull back, showing the lone rider and his precious cargo swallowed by the vast, indifferent whiteness, a tiny spark of defiance against the overwhelming power of the storm. The journey to Silas's ranch was a blur of biting wind and the steady, rhythmic warmth of the man who held her. Elara drifted in and out of a hazy consciousness, aware only of a deep, resonant heartbeat against her back, a shield against the storm's fury. When awareness finally solidified, it was to the crackling song of a robust fire and the scent of wood smoke and brewing coffee, unfamiliar yet deeply comforting. She lay on a simple cot, tucked beneath a heavy quilt that smelled faintly of pine and age. Her own clothes were gone, replaced by a soft, oversized flannel nightshirt that enveloped her like a cocoon. For a long moment, she simply stared at the rough-hewn log walls of the cabin, the play of firelight dancing across them, her mind struggling to bridge the gap between the frozen platform and this unexpected warmth. A deep ache pervaded her body, her muscles protesting the recent ordeal, but the terrifying cold was gone, replaced by a thawing soreness. Her fingers and toes tingled, a painful reminder of how close she had come. Slowly, she pushed herself up, the room tilting slightly. The cabin was small, utilitarian, yet impeccably clean. A stone hearth dominated one wall, the fire within it a blazing heart. A simple table and 2 chairs stood in the center, a few shelves held provisions, and in the corner, a larger bed, neatly made, suggested this was primarily a man's domain. And then she saw him. Silas sat at the table, his back to her, mending a piece of tack, his large hands surprisingly deft. He seemed a part of the very timbers of the cabin, solid, unmovable. He made no sound, yet she knew he was aware of her stirring. The silence stretched, broken only by the fire's gentle roar and the distant, now muffled, howl of the wind. It was not an uncomfortable silence, she realized, but a peaceful one, a quiet space for her to gather her scattered senses. He had saved her, this silent, stoic man. He had brought her here, tended to her. Why? The question hung in the warm air. People, in her experience, rarely offered kindness without expecting something in return, often something she was unwilling or unable to give. Her past had taught her that trust was a fragile commodity, easily shattered. When he finally turned, his eyes, the color of a winter sky just before snow, met hers. They were serious, watchful, but held no judgment, no demand. He simply nodded, a small, almost imperceptible gesture. "You were near frozen solid," he stated, his voice still gravelly, as if each word was carefully chosen and weighed. He rose and ladled something warm from a pot simmering by the fire. Broth. He brought it to her, his movements unhurried, deliberate. Elara's hands were still clumsy, trembling slightly as she took the mug. The warmth seeped into her, chasing away the last vestiges of the icy chill. "Thank you," she whispered, her own voice hoarse, unfamiliar after hours of disuse and exposure. It was the first direct exchange between them, 2 small words carrying a weight of unspoken gratitude and a nascent, fragile trust. He merely grunted in acknowledgement, returning to his mending, affording her the privacy to recover. Days bled into a week. The blizzard raged outside, effectively cutting them off from the world, cocooning them in an enforced intimacy. Ilara slowly regained her strength. Silas remained a man of few words. He provided for her, ensured the fire never died, shared his simple meals, and asked nothing. He slept on a makeshift bed of furs by the hearth, leaving her the cot. This quiet, unwavering respect was a balm to her bruised spirit. She began to help in small ways, tidying the small cabin, mending one of his shirts with neat, practiced stitches, a skill from her former life, a life she tried not to think about. She noticed the small details of his existence, the worn Bible on his nightstand, the single, faded photograph of a woman with kind eyes and a young child tucked inside its pages. His own quiet grief seemed to resonate with her own unspoken sorrows. One evening, as the wind outside finally began to soften its lament, she found her voice again, more than just a whisper of thanks. "My name is Ilara Reed," she said, her gaze fixed on the dancing flames. I was supposed to be a teacher." In Promise Valley, Silas paused in his carving of a small wooden bird, his knife still. He looked at her, his expression unreadable in the flickering light. "Promise Valley is a hard ride from here, especially now. The pass will be snowed in for weeks." He didn't ask why she was alone, why no one had met her. He simply stated facts. This absence of prying questions was another unexpected kindness. Ilara felt a small, tight knot in her chest begin to loosen. Here, in this isolated cabin, with this quiet, honorable man, she felt a flicker of safety she hadn't experienced in a very long time. The scars of her past, the branding of the outcast and the sting of unjust accusation, were still there, etched deep within her soul, but for the first time, they didn't seem to be the entirety of her story. The camera would focus on her hands, no longer blue, but slowly mending, mirroring her own internal healing, and then on Silas's face, watching her with a gentle, protective expression that hinted at feelings deeper than mere responsibility. The sanctuary was holding, the healing had begun. The relentless grip of winter finally loosened its hold on the high country. The snow receded like a slow tide, revealing a land scrubbed clean, sharp green shoots of grass piercing the thawing earth. Sunlight, tentative at first, then bolder, spilled into the valley where Silas's ranch lay nestled, bringing with it the songs of returning birds and the murmur of meltwater streams. The cabin, once a fortress against the blizzard, now felt like a sun-dappled haven. Ilara, too, had thawed. Color had returned to her cheeks, a light to her eyes that had been extinguished for so long. The quiet rhythm of life on the ranch, punctuated by Silas's sparse but kind interactions, had woven a fragile tapestry of peace around her. She found herself humming as she helped with chores, her hands, once scarred by frostbite, now capable and busy. She even dared to laugh once, a soft, surprising sound, when one of Silas's new lambs, bold and curious, tried to nibble on her skirt. Silas had stopped his work, a rare smile touching his own lips, his gaze lingering on her with an intensity that made her heart flutter in a way that was both new and strangely familiar. He never pressed, never presumed. He had shared stories of his late wife, Mary, and their son, Thomas, lost to fever years ago, his voice quiet, laden with a sorrow that had mellowed with time but never truly faded. It was a shared vulnerability, a silent understanding of loss that drew Ilara closer to this stoic man. She, in turn, had hesitantly spoken of her love for teaching, the joy of opening young minds, though the shadows of why she'd had to leave her last post still clung to her words, a bitter aftertaste she couldn't quite articulate, even to him. But the sanctuary, for all its gentle strength, was not impervious to the outside world. One crisp spring morning, as Silas was mending a fence line far up the valley and Ilara was tending a small patch of earth she hoped to turn into a vegetable garden near the cabin, a rider appeared on the horizon. Not the familiar, steady approach of Silas on Bess, but someone else, a stark, dark figure against the vibrant green of the new pasture. Ilara's breath caught in her throat. An instinct, honed by past betrayals, screamed a silent warning. The rider drew closer, and the features sharpened into a chillingly familiar visage. Josiah Blackwood. Not related to Silas, she knew, for Silas had no kin left in these parts, but a man of the same name was a bitter irony. This Blackwood was from her past, a pillar of the community in the town she had fled, a man whose piety was a mask for a cruel, unyielding righteousness. He had been the chief architect of her ruin, his voice the loudest in the chorus of condemnation after she had refused his unwelcome advances, twisting her rejection into an accusation of impropriety that had cost her her position and her reputation. His eyes, cold and assessing, swept over her, taking in her simpler dress, her hand stained with honest soil, a faint sneer touching his thin lips. "Miss Reed," he said, his voice as smooth and chilling as river stones. "Or should I say, the woman who calls herself Miss Reed. It seems the wilderness has not swallowed you whole, as some had hoped." Ilara felt the warmth of the spring day leach away, replaced by the familiar ice of fear. The whispers, the pointed fingers, the slammed doors, it all came rushing back. "Mr. Blackwood," she managed, her voice barely a whisper, her hands instinctively clenching. "What are you doing here?" "Concern for your mortal soul, naturally," he replied, though his eyes held no concern, only a glint of triumph. "And to see that justice, however delayed, is served. The good people of Promise Valley deserve to know who seeks to dwell among them." He had tracked her. The tendrils of her past had reached even this remote sanctuary. News traveled slowly, but it traveled. Someone in Redemption Creek must have spoken of a woman matching her description, found near Frozen, taken in by the reclusive rancher. From there, Blackwood's insidious influence would have spread. Whispers would have started in Promise Valley, a community eager for new beginnings but also wary of shadows from elsewhere. The shifting chorus was beginning to stir. Ilara could almost hear their distant, judgmental murmurs, fanned by Blackwood's righteous indignation. He dismounted, his presence an immediate blight on the peaceful landscape. "You will find," Blackwood continued, his voice hardening, "that your deceptions do not hold sway here. I have already spoken to certain upstanding citizens in Promise Valley. They are perturbed." He took a step closer, and Ilara instinctively recoiled, her hand flying to the simple wooden amulet Silas had carved for her, a small bird in flight, a symbol of the freedom she had briefly tasted. The intrusion was complete. The ghost of her past had not only found her but was actively poisoning the fragile piece she had begun to build. The camera would capture the stark contrast between Blackwood's dark, imposing figure and the vibrant life of the spring morning, his shadow literally falling over Ilara, and a close-up on her face, the newfound light dimming, replaced by a familiar hunted look. The sanctuary was breached, the test had arrived. Silas returned as dusk painted the sky in hues of bruised purple and fading orange, his usual quietude replaced by a grim tension. He'd seen Blackwood's horse tethered outside the cabin from a distance, and a cold fury, an emotion he rarely indulged, had settled in his gut. He found Ilara inside, not by the hearth, but standing rigidly by the small window, her back to the room, her silhouette a portrait of despair against the dying light. Josiah Blackwood was seated at Silas's table, an air of smug ownership about him, as if he were the master of this house, not a venomous intruder. The air was thick with unspoken accusations and Ilara's silent fear. Blackwood rose as Silas entered, a predatory smile on his lips. "Ah, Mr. Blackwood. We share a name, it seems, though I trust little else. I am Josiah Blackwood, from a town that had the misfortune of employing this woman." He gestured dismissively towards Ilara. Silas ignored him, his gaze fixed on Ilara's slumped shoulders. He crossed the room in 2 strides, his presence filling the small space, a bulwark of strength. He placed a hand gently on her arm. "Ilara," he said, his voice low, resonant. She flinched at his touch, then slowly turned, her eyes wide, filled with a pain that lanced through him. He told them," she whispered, her voice cracking. "In Promise Valley. He told them lies." Silas's gaze, hard as flint, shifted to Josiah Blackwood. "This is my home," Silas stated, his voice deceptively calm, yet underscored with a dangerous current. "And this woman is under my protection. Whatever business you have, state it plainly and then leave." Blackwood chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. "Protection? From the truth? She is a Jezebel, a corrupter of decency. She was run out of Oak Haven for immoral conduct, for trying to seduce honest men. That's a lie." Ilara's voice, though trembling, cut through Blackwood's sanctimonious tone. It was the first spark of defiance, fanned by Silas's nearness, his unspoken support. She turned fully, her chin lifting, the firelight catching the unshed tears in her eyes, transforming them into points of fiery resolve. He twists the truth because I refused him. Because I would not be his property. Her voice gained strength with each word. He hounded me, spread rumors, turned my friends and neighbors against me with his poisonous whispers. I left to find peace, to start anew, not to escape justice, for I committed no crime. Josiah Blackwood's face contorted with rage, his mask of piety slipping. Insolent woman! You dare accuse me? He took a threatening step towards her, but Silas moved with surprising speed, positioning himself squarely between Ilara and her accuser. Silas was not a large man, but he possessed a wiry strength forged from years of hard labor, and an unyielding will that radiated from him like heat from the forge. You will not touch her, Silas said, his voice a low growl. You have said your piece. Now, get out. The confrontation had escalated. This was no longer just about Ilara's past, it was about her present, her future, and Silas's unwavering stand by her side. Blackwood, realizing he could not physically intimidate Silas, sneered. You'll regret this, rancher. The people of Promise Valley are God-fearing folk. They won't stand for a harlot in their midst, nor for the man who harbors her. You'll both be outcasts. He turned to leave, then paused at the door. There's a town meeting in Promise Valley tomorrow. About the new school teacher. I suspect Miss Reed will be the main topic of discussion. Perhaps you should attend. If you dare show your faces. And with that, he was gone, leaving a chill in the cabin that the roaring fire could not quite dispel. Silence descended, heavy and fraught. Ilara finally let out a ragged sob, covering her face with her hands. Silas didn't speak immediately. He stoked the fire, the rhythmic clang of the poker a strangely comforting sound. Then he turned to her, his expression serious but gentle. He doesn't decide your worth, Ilara, he said softly. They don't decide it. You do. He took her hands, gently pulling them from her face. His thumbs brushed away her tears. We'll go to that meeting. Ilara looked up, her eyes searching his. But what if they believe him? What if they cast us out? Then we face it together, Silas stated, his gaze unwavering, his grip on her hands firm. Your past does not define you here. Not with me. In his eyes, she saw not pity, but respect. Not doubt, but a fierce, protective loyalty that wrapped around her heart like the warmest quilt. Her inner strength, nurtured in the sanctuary of his kindness, began to unfurl. She had been an outcast, yes. Bruised and quiet. But here, standing with Silas, she felt the stirrings of the resilient survivor. The camera would focus on their clasped hands, a symbol of their united front, then on Ilara's face, fear still present, but now overlaid with a dawning courage, a resolve to fight. The fire in the hearth blazed brighter, mirroring the fire ignited within them. The climactic confrontation was set not just for Ilara against her past, but for their bond against the judgment of the world. The Promise Valley Meeting Hall, a newly erected clapboard structure smelling of fresh pine and nervous anticipation, was filled to capacity. Faces, stern and curious, turned as Ilara and Silas entered. A hush fell over the room, broken only by a few scattered, hostile whispers. The shifting chorus was in full voice, their expressions a mixture of judgment, suspicion, and a reluctant curiosity. Josiah Blackwood sat at the front, near the makeshift podium, a look of grim satisfaction on his face. He had primed this pump of public opinion well. Ilara felt a tremor of her old fear, the instinct to flee, to hide. But Silas's hand was firm on her elbow, his presence a steady anchor in the sea of disapproving eyes. He guided her to two empty seats near the back, his gaze sweeping the room, challenging, yet calm. The meeting began, led by a portly man named Mayor Thompson, who cleared his throat nervously. We are gathered today, he began, to discuss the appointment of a teacher for our new school. A vital role for the future of Promise Valley. He paused, his eyes flicking towards Ilara, then quickly away. However, certain information has come to light regarding one of the candidates, a Miss Ilara Reed. Josiah Blackwood rose, uninvited. Information, Mayor? Call it what it is, a warning. This woman, he pointed dramatically at Ilara, is a fugitive from decency, a stain on any community that would harbor her. I have spoken. I have provided testimony from Oak Haven. She is unfit, a murmur rippled through the crowd. Some nodded in agreement, their faces hard. Others looked uncertain, their gazes shifting between Blackwood's accusatory stance and Ilara's pale, composed face. Ilara felt Silas's encouraging pressure on her arm. Now. It was now or never. She stood, her legs trembling slightly, but her voice, when she spoke, was surprisingly clear, carrying through the suddenly silent hall. My name is Ilara Reed, she began, her eyes meeting the gazes of the townsfolk, one by one. It is true that I left Oak Haven under a cloud of accusation. Accusations made by that man, she gestured to Blackwood, whose face tightened. He accused me of impropriety because I refused his advances, because I would not be bullied or coerced. He used his standing in the community to destroy my reputation and my livelihood. When I dared to defy him, her voice grew stronger, imbued with the quiet conviction of truth. I came here seeking not to hide, but to rebuild. To offer the skills I have, the love of teaching that is as much a part of me as my own breath. She paused, her gaze sweeping over the children in the room, their innocent faces looking up at her. I believe children deserve a teacher who values truth, integrity, and courage. Values Mr. Blackwood seems to know little about. Blackwood scoffed. Lies. She twists words to her advantage. But a subtle shift was occurring in the room. Ilara's quiet dignity, her directness, was more compelling than Blackwood's loud denunciations. Some of the women in the audience exchanged thoughtful glances. One older woman, her face etched with the wisdom of years, nodded slowly. Then Silas stood beside Ilara. He did not speak loudly, but his words, like his presence, carried immense weight in this valley where his quiet integrity was known, if not always understood. I am Silas Blackwood, he said, his eyes locking with the mayor's. This woman, Ilara Reed, came to my ranch near death, frozen in a blizzard because the welcome she was promised here failed her. I have sheltered her. I have seen her character. She is honest. She is kind. She is stronger than any woman I have ever known. His gaze softened as he looked at Ilara for a fleeting moment, a look of profound admiration and affection that did not go unnoticed by the assembly. This valley is named Promise, Silas continued, turning back to the crowd. What promise do we offer? One of judgment and fear, led by the bitter words of one man? Or one of fairness, of looking into a person's soul rather than listening to hearsay? Ilara Reed is a good woman. And she would be a fine teacher for your children. A tense silence followed. Then, the older woman who had nodded earlier, a Mrs. Abigail Henderson, a respected elder, rose. I've known Silas Blackwood, and his father before him. Never known either to lie or protect a scoundrel. And I've listened to this young woman. I see no deceit in her eyes. I see courage. Another voice, a farmer from the edge of the valley, spoke up. My boy, Tom, ain't had no learning. He deserves a chance. She speaks fair. Slowly, tentatively, the tide began to turn. The shifting chorus was finding a new harmony. Josiah Blackwood, seeing his influence wane, his face flushed with fury, began to shout. Fools! You'll all regret this. She'll corrupt your children. But Mayor Thompson, emboldened by the shift in the room, banged his gavel. That's enough, Mr. Blackwood. We've heard your piece. And we've heard Miss Reed. And Mr. Blackwood, our Mr. Blackwood. He looked around the hall. I believe it's time for the people of Promise Valley to decide what kind of community we want to be. The vote, when it came, was not unanimous, but it was decisive. Ilara Reed would be their teacher. A wave of relief, so profound it almost buckled her knees, washed over Ilara. Silas's hand found hers, his grip warm and strong. Josiah Blackwood, his face a mask of malevolent fury, stormed out of the hall, his threats and curses lost in the rising murmur of acceptance and even quiet congratulation. As people began to file out, several townsfolk approached Ilara and Silas. A woman offered Ilara a shy smile and a jar of preserves. The farmer, Tom's father, shook Silas's hand vigorously. Mrs. Henderson patted Ilara's arm. "Welcome to Promise Valley, child." Truly welcome. The camera would linger on Ilara's face, tears now streaming freely, but these were tears of relief, of vindication. And on Silas, watching her, a quiet, deep pride in his eyes. The past had been confronted, its ghost banished not by force, but by truth and courage, and the willingness of a community to choose hope over fear. Their bond, forged in a blizzard and tested by malice, had not only survived but had illuminated the path for others. Poetic justice had been served, not with fire and brimstone, but with the quiet dawn of acceptance. And so, the wind that once carried whispers of Ilara's sorrow now sang a lullaby of her legacy across Promise Valley. The meeting hall confrontation became a touchstone in the town's memory, a story told and retold, of how courage and truth found fertile ground. Ilara and Silas were married that summer, beneath the wide Montana sky, the wildflowers blooming in profusion around them, witnessed by the now welcoming community of Promise Valley. Mrs. Henderson baked the cake, and Tom, the farmer's son, Ilara's first pupil, presented her with a slightly lopsided but heartfelt bouquet. Their life on the ranch unfolded with the steady rhythm of the seasons. Silas's quiet strength and Ilara's resilient spirit were a perfect match, their love a silent, deep river that nourished everything around them. The small cabin, once a refuge, expanded, timber by timber, echoing with newfound laughter and the patter of small feet. 2 sons and a daughter were born to them, children who grew up knowing the value of hard work, the comfort of a loving home, and the importance of standing for what is right. Ilara, true to her calling, became the heart of Promise Valley's education. The small, one-room schoolhouse thrived under her guidance, her gentle wisdom shaping generations. She taught not just reading and sums, but compassion, resilience, and the courage to question injustice. The scars of her past remained, not as sources of pain, but as reminders of battles fought and won, of strength discovered in the deepest adversity. She often told her pupils, "Your past is a map, not a destination." Silas, ever her quiet protector, her steadfast partner, saw his ranch flourish. His lands expanded, his herds grew, but his greatest pride was always his family, the warmth Ilara had brought back into his life, a warmth he had thought lost forever. The man who had been a solitary figure became a respected elder, his advice sought, his quiet integrity a cornerstone of the community. The shifting chorus of Promise Valley had long ago changed its tune from suspicion to profound admiration. The townsfolk who had once whispered about the mysterious woman rescued from the blizzard now pointed to Ilara and Silas as an example of enduring love and unbreakable spirit. Their home became a place of welcome, their table often shared with neighbors and friends. The symbolic objects of their early days took on new meaning. The worn Bible on Silas's nightstand now held pressed flowers from their wedding. The small wooden bird he had carved for Ilara sat on the schoolhouse windowsill, a reminder of freedom and hope. As years turned into decades, Ilara and Silas grew old together, their love deepening with each passing season, their hands, weathered by time and labor, still finding each other in quiet moments. They saw their children grow and marry, their own grandchildren filling the ranch with a new generation of laughter. Their story became woven into the fabric of Promise Valley, a local legend passed down. They said the wildflowers on the hill where they were married bloomed brighter than anywhere else. They said the wind in the pines around their ranch whispered their names. They became more than just Ilara and Silas, they became a testament to the enduring power of love to heal, to redeem, and to build a lasting legacy from the ashes of despair. The camera would offer a montage, the simple wedding, the growing family, Ilara teaching in the sunlit schoolhouse, Silas working the land, their hands clasped in old age as they watch a sunset paint the valley gold. Final sweeping shots of the prosperous ranch, the thriving town, and the enduring landscape that had witnessed their journey from desperation to triumph. What did you think of their journey? Rate this story from 1 to 10 in the comments, and share what resonated most with you. Until next time, may your own stories be filled with strength and enduring love. Don't forget to subscribe for more echoes of the past.